We need to cease to consume, and I'm somewhat facetious in suggesting that we all become aficionados of Chippendale furniture and that sort of thing. That isn't the plan either. But the endless fetishism for consumer objects is wrecking the planet. And then finally, well, no, not finally, there's one after this, but another negative, and this is a slightly more difficult to follow, requires a little cogitation. It's insidious. We shouldn't watch. We shouldn't watch. Watching is some kind of voyeuristic, sadomasochistic peculiarity that we are permitting ourselves because we think there are too many of us to do. But I don't think this is true. I think watching is an incredibly disempowering thing. Millions of people live half-awake, larval lives watching 6.5 hours of TV a day. And as long as they stay in their homes, shopping by phone and fax, everybody is happy. But they participate not at all in the society. They're the marks, and they consume. They consume the media, the entertainment, the clothes, the styles, the brands. They are the morons who are keeping this system running. And I assume that largely the people here tonight are not. We're the people who grind out all this stuff. I mean, I feel I do this. I write books. I produce ideas. They are grist for the marketplace. Harper and Bantam don't care what I'm saying. What they care about is how the books are selling. Product number 3245A sub F. How is it doing in the marketplace? Do not watch, because when you're watching, you're not at the center of things. Largely what I'm talking about here is reclaiming experience. Reclaiming experience. This is what's been taken from us. This is why the new music and dance culture is so important. This is why drug culture is so important. This is why the celebration of sexual minorities is so important. This is all about coming to grips with who you really are and how you really feel, and then experiencing it. You are not owned. It is not he or she or them or it that you belong to. And we have been told that we have to fit in. We have to make sense. This is not true. We are creating a world that celebrates diversity, that celebrates the uniqueness of every person. The complexification of our species is a process directly dependent on the complexity that we each bring to the process. The diversity that is spreading through society is a concomitant to the boundary dissolution. And I really believe that science's inability to make sense of human beings in the world as part of nature, to make sense of art, love, hate, aspiration, fear. The failure to make sense of this is the failure to come to terms with the transcendental aspect of reality. We are the best evidence there is that something extraordinarily unusual is happening on this planet, and that it's not something which will go on for millions of years. It began about 20,000 years ago. It's a self-advancing, self-expanding, self-defining process, and it takes no prisoners. There is no going back. There is no going back from the momentum that history has imparted to the human imagination. There is only a going forward into what is called a forward escape through art, through design, through management and integration. That we have to push the art pedal to the floor. We have never designed our societies. We have never managed our societies or our lives. We have never tried to make what we were serve an aesthetic agenda. And that's why we've created a mess. In the absence of an aesthetic agenda, what we've created is Animal House on a global scale. So now it's time to pay the piper. And just in closing, the catalyst now is a combination of technologies, solid-state technologies, and pharmacology. The world that we are leaving behind, the world that failed us, was a world of ideologies and mechanical technologies. And the ideologies, one by one, are going down the tubes. Marxism, Freudianism, fascism, they one by one will be discredited. They cannot sustain. And the mechanical technologies cannot be sustained. They pollute, they dehumanize, they wreck the planet. What is coming into place is a world where drugs replace ideology. That's why drugs are so terrifying to those who oppose them. That's why they say you want to escape. You want to take drugs to escape. That's right. You want to escape. You want to escape fascism, communism, socialism, existentialism, phenomenology, positivism, all of this stuff. You want to escape ideology into the felt presence of the body, which means drugs and sex and syncopated music. And parallel to this development and happening in different sectors of society is the hardwiring of our imagination. The building of databases that we can access instantaneously that make the human past co-present with the now. The boundary dissolution that I'm talking about includes the division between past, present, and future. This is what it means to end Newtonian time. It means that the past, the present, and the future become a coextensive domain where everyone then awakens to the fact, which was always there to be observed, that there is not simply one past. There is nothing called the past. I have a past. You have a past. It's not the same past. Consequently, the futures we are going to are different. We create our own realities as a species and as an individual. And so what we are passing through here in the now, in this lecture, in the 20th century, is a moment of community. A gam, as Melville would say. A gam is where two sailing ships, two whaling ships meet at sea. That's what we have here. A gam, a moment of dialogue. And then we will each go back to our own private Idahos. But the thing to take back to those private Idahos is the awareness that human history secures the central importance of human beings. We are part of a universal adventure. What happens to us decrees the fate of a vast set of universal processes and circumstances. We are not ephemeral, irrelevant to each other or to the greater whole. This is the truth of psychedelics that Aboriginal societies have always known, and it's the truth that we had to sacrifice in order to make the prodigal journey into matter. But the prodigal journey into matter has now been concluded. We've found the top quark. We've shut down the super collider. Now we need to go back to the problems of the human soul. And there isn't much time, but the tools that have been put into our hands are the most powerful tools there have ever been. The Gaian connection into the vegetable mind of the planet that we are trying to mirror and hardwire on a human scale. Nature is full of interest and affection for humanity. It's up to us to discover that humanity in ourselves, because we have gone so sour along the rational path, and connect it up with the rest of nature. This is a process which is happening, but it's a birth. It can go with ease because we help it from this side, or it can be traumatic because we resist, and as McLuhan said, insist on driving the automobile of history using only the rear view mirror. That's no way to proceed. We need to wake up, smell the coffee, turn on the lights, get loaded, and direct the human future toward a mirroring of aspirations such that we are pleased then to turn the enterprise over to those who follow us. Well, that's that, I think. We'll take a brief break, like 15 minutes. I'll sign books. I'll only do signatures because of the shortness of the break. Circulate around. We'll come back and do a half an hour or so of Q&A. Thank you very, very much for coming out tonight. Nice to see you.
Please
ideas like that states spontaneously perturb themselves to higher states of order, that order within a system is conserved, so forth and so on. Yes, fractal mathematics is an intellectual revolution, the magnitude of which has not yet been fully appreciated, I think. It's a very, very big deal. It's just that so much is happening in our world that it's very hard for us to know what are the real epical turning points and what is just flim-flam and hypola. But the power of fractal mathematics has carried the human mind to a whole new level. Mathematics was not thought to be a natural science by its practitioners until very recently. It was thought to be an abstract undertaking. But it turns out its most abstract constructions have a curious congruency over population growth, the organization of species in a rainforest, so forth and so on. Yes, there is the cultural change that is coming is not superficial. It's not simply about club dance styles, fashion, sexual mores. It's about all that, but when it's all over, the mathematics will be different, the physics will be different, everything will be different. This is a major shift in cultural values. Over here.
In light of your insight into despair has been done, what's your take on the suicide of Kurt Cobain?
Well, if your strategy, I've thought of this strategy too, of course, I think any artist does. What do I think of Kurt Cobain's suicide? What is the question? What do I think of Kurt Cobain's suicide? And the answer is, as a strategy for advancing your career, I think you should wait till you're a little bit deeper into your career. Anyway, it was my humble opinion that Primus did it better. And anyway, I like Coil, so let me off the hook here. I'm a house guy, and I wish those people luck, but you're more likely to find me listening to World Without Walls. Yeah.
I'm a teacher, and I'm interested in this idea of the nature of intuition. I wonder if you would speak to the nature of intuition, its role in learning, and perhaps how to encourage it in children.
Well, intuition refers back to this, I made mention of nothing comes unannounced. That's intuition. But the rational mind has a real ability to slough off the intuition. The intuition never shouts. It never grabs you by the lapels. It just says, Maybe that airplane looks a little funny, and then you don't get on it, and it blows up. So intuition is basically a function of listening, and since it's very hard for people to listen, especially dominator types or opinionated types, I think the key to intuition is to listen. It's just like, the key to nature is to look, I think. I read a wonderful quote last week. I think it was Goethe said, thinking is better than knowing, but looking is best of all. And I think that's a very psychedelic perception. Knowing is the worst of all. Knowing is a huge drag, and it's a chimera anyway. Nobody knows anything. Don't let them kid you. I mean, we're monkeys here. Let's not lose sight of that. When I say we should stop consuming, I don't for a moment suppose that we're going to live in a world where no consumption takes place. I mean, or we're going to live in a world where population growth is instantly halted. There's more than one way to force novelty out of a system, and simply repetitiously breeding, that's a habitual activity. And it does force a certain kind of novelty, but it's a novelty born of desperation. My notion is that you get much more novelty out of a system if every person is valued, if every person has leisure time and opportunity for education and this sort of thing. The ingression into novelty doesn't necessarily mean an endless expansion of an inventory of available tchotchkes. It means a vertical integration of all of these possibilities. So I think we are going to elaborate more technologies, more connections. There are going to be all kinds of unusual configurations generated, but to simply suppose that we have to continue in the direction we've been going, I think is a mistake. Capitalism is not a human-friendly meme. I mean, capitalism will sell the ground right out from under where you're standing. It has developed a rapacious appetite for its own survival at the expense of human beings. Some memes do this. I mean, fascism was a meme so virulent to the human agenda that major outbreaks of it, the whole planet halted what it was doing and stomped it out. And now we have residual outbreaks here and there. In terms of the ingression into novelty, it isn't a matter of human decision. It's happening around the clock. It's unstoppable. The cultural experience is becoming more and more psychedelic as it becomes more and more translinear and post-Newtonian. Literally, society is entering into a kind of hyperspace, or cyberspace, some people call it. I think of cyberspace as the literalization of hyperspace. One is the Platonic goal, the other is the human artifact that seeks to realize that goal. But definitely the cascade of novelty has now reached such an intensity that you have to be very lumpen indeed, I think, not to see it happening, especially if you live in a town like this one, for crying out loud. And this is the concrescence of the concrescence here. I'll take one more question. Yeah, here. Well, what I actually imagine is a confluence of the two. The question basically was compare and contrast evolving cyber technology with shamanic technology. Compare and contrast drugs and computers. Are these things in parallel? Are they complementary, or are they opposed? What are they? I think that computers are drugs too large to swallow, essentially, and that and that what we will see in the future is computers much more like drugs, and drugs much more like computers. We are going to see drugs that are information-based drugs. So if you want to study Hegel, you will take Hegeline. We're going to see drugs which are self-limiting in their effects. I mean, imagine, for instance, a form of heroin that it works 10 times and then it never works again for you in your life. This is possible. There are drugs which will, I think this is an interesting frontier, drugs which only work for a while. So there's no possibility of distorted or addictive lifestyles because it works for 3 months and then it stops working, and nobody spends money on something that doesn't work. We're going to see the whole serotonin pathway redesigned through the trans Prozac drugs. We're going to see psychedelic states simulated in virtual reality. We're going to see the breakdown of three-dimensional space versus the machine space. And all of these things are essentially psychedelic effects. It's only this Newtonian emphasis on product and ego and body locus that makes us see the drugs as somehow locked in the molecules. The entire experience of human history is a psychedelic experience. And we're now in that place deep in the second hour where it all comes together. The integration of some kind of unity out of the multiplicity of phenomena is now in reach. We are literally hardwiring the human unconscious. The human unconscious is ceasing to exist. It's becoming a smaller and smaller domain as it is transferred over into the hardwiring of the cultural database. We cannot become the species we want to be with an unconscious mind. That's an artifact of the monkey phase that has no place in a global civilization. And the making conscious of the unconscious is the combined task of cybernetics and pharmacology. And I trust that everything is on track and moving forward. It seems to me the adventure is underway. I don't see myself as predicting something that will happen. I've become a narrator of a phenomenon in progress, if you understand what to look for. Granted, it will become more intense in subsequent episodes, but all the pieces are now in play. The challenge of postmodernity, the challenge of the psychedelic millenarian eschatonic world is the challenge of our own daily lives and relationships. It is here. It is here. All right, and I'm out of here. So.